Welcome into the HoosierIllustrated.com post-game wrap-up show. We are here immediately following Indiana basketball's, first loss and what feels like a little bit now to Oregon on the road. Tough loss, 73-64. I'm Drew Rosenberg, joined by Hoosier Illustrated owner and founder, Alec Lastly. Alec, what was kind of your initial thoughts of, let's just talk about the closing stretch. 10-0 run to close the game for Oregon. What do you kind of see there?
Yeah, not only 10-0 run, but on the flip side, I mean, I think it even dates back to the 8-19 mark of the second half. Indiana takes the lead and then goes 1 of 8 before they go 0 of 7. Then they get two straight field goals there. I can't remember. I think it was Malik Renew, the layup, and then the big Trey Galloway three. But outside of that, they finish 2 of 12 from the field. They obviously contributes to that 10-0 run there late. It's something that had plagued Indiana for the majority of this season, right? They always seem to go on 2, 3, 4 minute either scoreless droughts or long droughts without a made field goal. And they hadn't really had that type of drought, not only in this game, but specifically, over the last 2 weeks here with their winning streak. And that's what's obviously helped in these late game situations is being able to finish games with whether it be, big time shots late. Obviously, we saw that multiple games with Trey Galloway, and I think we thought that was probably going to be the case after he hit that big three there late in this one, but just failed to get again the makes that they needed coming down the stretch, and that's a long time, 8 minutes to go with just two made field goals, regardless of what type of game that you're in, and that's going to be the thing that I think you're going to have to look back on in this one, because Indiana did just about everything that they needed to do. I mean, you shoot better than Oregon did.
Yeah.
One of the best 3-point shooting teams in the conference. You don't really turn the ball over much, and you really kind of helped yourself out with some key offensive rebounds for the majority there of the second half. Obviously struggled with that in the first half, but that 2 of 12 stretch in the last 8 minutes, just to coincide with Oregon's dominance on the glass and with their second chance opportunities. I mean, that's just something you're not going to be able to overcome in a 1 or 2 possession game, which is what obviously this was for the majority of the final 20 minutes there.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned turnovers. I think Indiana had 10 as a team, and I was ready to come into this kind of talk about how well they did at keeping the ball and handling it. But then you look at the turnovers, and it was 3 turnovers in that final, after that under 4 timeout, where, you need to get the most of your possessions. And it's, maybe the turnovers weren't as a team, it wasn't that many, but they were really costly. And then you mentioned the second chance points, giving up, I mean, I think the number was 23 second chance points. So,
Yeah, it was a season high for Oregon too,
yeah.
as well. So,
And you look at Indiana's team. I mean, you have Umar Bala, Malik Renew. There is size. Like there's no in no world should they be giving up 23 second chance points. It felt like every single loose ball Oregon was grabbing. And then free throws. I think it was 68-64 with a minute to go, and you could just go back to the start of the game. Indiana started 1 of 5 from the free throw line in the first half. And that didn't include Malik Renew missing the front end of a 1-on-1. I think there were some other 1-on-1 misses. Indiana left a lot of meat on the bone tonight, where it was like, you really should have won this game. They played well enough to win. It was just really 3 areas you kind of point to, and like that killed you.
yeah, no, it did. And I mean, again, you go back to their inability to finish out possessions. I thought not only from an energy perspective, but from a kind of whole game plan perspective, they did exactly what you would probably want them to do coming into this one. But just unfortunately, they were not able to close out those possessions. Whether it were, at some points in the first half, it was almost 3 or 4 different chances that Oregon was getting looks at there offensively, and you're just not going to be able to sustain that for a long period of time. And I think they had 13 second chance points in the first half.
Yeah.
Obviously, finished with 10 in the second half, so really didn't offset much there. And obviously had a season high. Oregon, not a team that is a terrific rebounding team, so I think that was kind of more of the concern there. I don't know if that was something relatively quick turnaround last day, obviously on a long road trip out west. If that has anything to do with it, obviously the intensity that they've been playing with for the last 2 weeks, with almost every single game being a must win. But that's one thing. Indiana gave up. I think it was 4 out of the first 7 games of the season. They gave up double-digit offensive rebounds to the opponents, and then went the next 22 games only giving up 4. So this is not something that was a common theme for this Indiana team, because they have been obviously a very, very talented rebounding team for the most part. So that's just now the big concern moving into Ohio State, a team that is obviously very gritty on the glass, in a very hard fought team, obviously, in that first matchup. That's just something that you probably have a little bit more concern now, just due to the fact that, again, Oregon's not a talented rebounding team, and that's one thing that I thought Indiana was going to really be able to take advantage of in this one, which obviously did not come to fruition.
Yeah, not sure if you saw this stat. I just noticed it myself. Indiana went 8 of 18 on layups in this one. It's one of those things. You're shooting under 50% at the rim, especially for Indiana, this team that they need to play inside out, just the roster makeup. It's just one of those things that's it's hard to overcome. And
it is. I think there were multiple times where, outside of Nate Biddle, this team is they're long, but they don't have a lot of really, really good shot blockers. Biddle, obviously, a guy who can do that, but I thought there were different times in the first half when he obviously went out with 2 fouls that they could have relied a little bit more on their bigs, that they didn't. And obviously, when he stayed in the game there in the second half, he kind of dominated the majority of that defensively, and they had a lot of good drop downs from whether it was Kwame Evans or Bamba, just guys who just have length that really impacted a lot of shots there at the rim, which was unfortunate, obviously, for Indiana, because they really did dominate a lot of the paint presence there for the majority of that one.
Yeah, I do want to talk about some positives. I think the obvious place to start is Cannon Carlisle. It's kind of been with him. It'd been a really disappointing season. It has been a really disappointing season for him. He came in with a lot of expectations, and today was a game you kind of saw what was the hope for Carlisle. He made two early threes, played some good defense. I think he finished -2, but was one of the few Hoosiers that was in the plus positives for the plus minus throughout the game. It was just kind of good to see him get going a little bit. Maybe this is something he can continue and build off of.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, he had 12 total points, I think, in the last 7 games combined, right? So he's not, been anyone that's been a factor offensively. And the biggest thing with him is obviously being able to make the shots, right? He's always brought really good energy defensively. He's always been a guy who you never have to really worry about his effort, but it's been his shot-making ability and just any sort of production offensively that's really caused him to not be playable at times and be out of the rotation. So we obviously got those 2 threes to go down early, got some momentum there, got some confidence. And he's a guy who really plays with a lot of confidence once he sees kind of that first shot go down. And we saw that, had a couple good drives late in the second half there as well. So, maybe this is something that you take into the next game.
Yeah.
And they're going to need that, obviously, for, however many games that they do have remaining going into postseason play, because they just can't rely solely on Anthony Leal and Miles Rice there in the off-ball spot, especially with Leal not being, a super productive scorer. They're going to need something else out of that backcourt, because Miles Rice still, even though we thought he kind of got through some of those midseason struggles over the last 3-4 games, still struggled at times tonight to really kind of create his own offense. Obviously, I think he was one of 7, and then 1 of 5 from 3, right? So if you're not getting any production out of him scoring the ball, you're going to need it somewhere else, because we saw again, even though Trey Galloway had a phenomenal game, that just puts a lot of pressure on him to not only handle the ball but also score. If you're not getting anything else from Miles Rice there. So definitely some positive moments there for Cannon Carlisle.
Yeah, I was kind of disappointed with Rice tonight. I mean, obviously, 1 of 7, there's going to be nights you don't hit shots, but I just think the way he plays, him taking 5 threes of his 7 attempts, you want him. I think Miles Rice is at his best. I think you and I have said this word maybe a million times in describing him, aggressive, but it's not just taking shots. I think for me, it's him putting pressure on the rim and getting to the rim because it opens stuff up for everyone, even if he's not taking the shot in the end. Just him being able to get the rim. I mean, there was a couple plays. I think he had a nice, I think it was to renew a little pocket pass. It might have been Leal who finished it, but either way, I mean, Rice is such a good passer when he's getting to the rim. It opens stuff up for everyone, but he's also a really good finisher at the rim. So for him, it just kind of, I feel like we talk about we need shooting, but for Rice, it's trying to get in that inside out going first, and he really just didn't do that at all tonight.
Yeah, and I mean, if but between that, right? So you have 1 of 7 from Miles Rice, you have 2 of 10 from Mackenzie Mbako, 4 of 12 from Malik Renew, right? If you're going to get 3 of the top 4 players there in terms of shot attempts, that that bad of a percentage, right? That's something that you're not going to be able to overcome, especially in a game that again was 1 or 2 possessions here until obviously a couple of those free throws late pushed that out. But the inability to again get consistent guard play is something that is probably going to come back to haunt this Indiana team, not only for the next again however many games, but just this season in general. And then obviously the extremely poor play for Mackenzie Mbako continues offensively. I mean, he's just not a lot of confidence outside of that 1-3 that he hit there almost in, I think, kind of in the secondary break there. Out of a quick run out in the second half, but really outside of that left corner 3 really did not show any sort of production that you'd be excited about. And it's again a very much of a difficult situation, especially with Luke Goody, who was in foul trouble for most of the night. That if you're not going to be able to have Luke Goody there on the floor, and kind of take some of those minutes away from Mackenzie Mbako, you need something out of him. And it just was another extremely poor performance from him offensively, something that you obviously need from that position if you're Indiana.
Yeah, and I think, you're going to look back at tonight. It's going to be, I've kind of talked about the what ifs with this team. There's been 4 or 5. This is going to be another one of those games you look back at. Like, Indiana really had a great opportunity there and couldn't close down the stretch. I think the other ones I've kind of talked about, it's been Maryland, Michigan, Purdue, Northwestern were like the 4, and UCLA was like kind of the 5th one, where it's like you took care of business in those games. This season looks completely different, and tonight's going to be one of those. And I think, the NCAA tournament buzz, I don't think this game, like this loss, it's not something that's going to knock the Hoosiers out of the tournament, but if they won tonight, it would have been like all right, you feel a lot better about their tournament chances going in. I think Ohio State now becomes must win for the Hoosiers if they want to get into the tournament.
Yeah, so I mean, again, this was not a game that they had to win, but it's a game where if you win this, you feel a lot more comfortable because you're now clearly in the field. I'm not sure what that Ohio State Nebraska score is at the moment, but I think it was going into overtime. There at the same time as Indiana was finishing up. So we'll see what happens with that, but that's going to be, I think it was going into this West Coast trip. You looked at that game, that Ohio State game, is pretty much whoever lost that one would be out of the field. That is, between Indiana and Ohio State. So it's probably going to come down to that one and see what happens. But it'll be interesting because I think Indiana, Oregon were, relatively locked into that potentially 8-9 matchup come the Big Ten tournament as well. So I think if Indiana wins that one on Saturday against Ohio State, I think you could have this matchup again in that first round matchup for the Hoosiers.
Yeah, wait, I think Oregon and Illinois I think Oregon passed Illinois right now, so it's a little
after that win.
There.
Okay.
Yeah. So I think they said it on the broadcast, and Illinois finishes with Purdue, Oregon finishes with Washington. Okay. I mean, I don't want to write off but I think Oregon's going to handle business against Washington. But I mean, I said it going into this game. I think it was, you got to win 2. So I think beat Ohio State and then win a game in the tournament gets you in. I think it gets you in, especially after what happened with Wake Forest and Duke last night. If Nebraska and Ohio State, one of these teams, they're like 2 other bubble teams. So it's Indiana's got to get to 20, I think, and then hope some other bubble teams kind of fall off. And then you got to hope there's no, big, bid stealers. If, some surprise team comes in and wins a conference that they weren't supposed to, and now you have an at-large team get in that was supposed to be a conference winner, then it comes really murky on Selection Sunday for Indiana. But, you win the Big Ten tournament, none of this matters.
Yeah, I mean, that's the good thing about what's obviously going to be in the Big Ten tournament is you have so many opportunities to, even if you just win one, right? That's going to be most likely a quad one win, which is going to be able to boost you more than any other team that's on the bubble there, outside of maybe Georgia. But I think Georgia's probably the only team that if you're Indiana and you happen to lose to Ohio State, right? That's probably that, and maybe Texas are the two teams that are probably the most scary at the moment in terms of potentially knocking you off.
I think
Because
Texas, they lost.
yeah,
Did they win today?
They ended up winning. Yeah, they blew it late, and then that went into overtime, and they almost blew it again in overtime. But they got a big win. Obviously, Georgia won again. So yeah, those are probably the two teams that if you do lose to Ohio State, you're really going to be watching come their SEC tournament, just because there's obviously so many different variables that go into those bubble teams. But that's probably the one instance that if you're a little worried, you're probably looking at those two. But yeah, if you win on Sunday or win on Saturday, I think you're going to be feeling pretty good about yourself, regardless of what happens moving into the Big Ten tournament.
Yeah, I mean, on Saturday, it's return home, obviously, senior night or senior day, I guess. I think it's going to be, so I know it's Ballo, Trey Galloway, Leal, Goody. Kind of don't know. I'm assuming he'll probably walk, but it's like, because I know there's talk of him getting the medical waiver.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see. I'm sure he'll walk and go from there. But yeah, those are the core guys that'll be participating from obviously this year.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, it could be the whole team leaving next year. You really don't know with the new coach or what really is going to happen. But for that game Saturday, we're going to have you covered on HoosierIllustrated.com. We're going to have full coverage of anything leading up to that. All the Indiana football players in the draft, CJ West, Curtis Rourke, all the stuff about them leading up to the draft. Got you covered on HoosierIllustrated.com. This has been the most recent edition of the HoosierIllustrated.com postgame wrap-up show. We'll be back with another episode after Ohio State on Saturday. Thank you for watching.